My name is Hai. I'm co-founder of Affluence, the company behind Party Matrix. I've talked to thousands of customers over the years, and I've seen every single type of use case and so forth. So with that, the purpose of this webinar is to give you a high-level overview of Party Matrix, as well as the fundamental backgrounds of the theory behind Party Matrix and how it helps. We cannot be comprehensive and address every single thing that's out there. But I think it'll give you pretty good insight on what are the things you can do with Party Matrix and how to get the most out of it. So one of the things I'd like to start with is actually the challenges we see all the time when customers are looking for a solution like Party Matrix. First of all, team members have trouble understanding what's priority right now. So I don't know if this happens to you, but if you start your day, do you know exactly what you need to work on? Do you know what are the things with the most impact at any point in time across all your areas of responsibilities? And then the corollary to that is actually it's really hard to keep track on the status of work, especially when you have multiple projects that's going on at any point in time. I think gone are the days where we just have 3 or 5 tasks or something like that that's on our table, and then we're working on it, and then at the end of the day we close the laptop and we're good to go. And instead, what happens is that we're getting communication from chat messages, Teams messages, emails, and meetings and so forth. And now more than ever before, we're sort of inundated with all this information that's coming from so many different contexts. So these are the challenges that I see all the time, and it's almost universal. If you don't experience at least one of these three, you're definitely a unicorn out there. So what is Party Matrix? It's a comprehensive email, priority, and project management software to help teams manage emails, conduct more efficient meetings, and get real-time status updates on critical projects and priorities. And there's a reason why it's called Party Matrix. It's not just a task or project management software. What we want to do is we want to help you focus on what are the things that truly matters. So Party Matrix is not there to manage your shopping list or the things that you're going to have to do anyways. Think of it as a software to help communicate to yourself as well as to your teammates what are the priorities at any point in time across everything that you have to do. So how does Party Matrix tackle those challenges that I mentioned earlier? First, we use something called the 4-quadrant method as the core methodology behind Party Matrix to promote effective prioritization. And I'll go into that in just a little bit. Secondly, Party Matrix provides you many different views, including what we call the one-on-one, the agenda, the timeline, in order to help you understand what you need to work on at any point in time within the right context. And then finally, Party Matrix provide really deep integrations into systems you already use, most prominently Microsoft Teams and Outlook. So we're probably the most integrated solution in that ecosystem to help you prioritize emails as well as tasks. So what makes Party Matrix different? It's the only project email and meeting management software that is Microsoft 365 security certified across our web app, Outlook app, and Teams app. And then the second thing that I'm really excited about is that over the past several months, we've really expanded on some AI capabilities to help both you as well as your team achieve your goals. So I'll try to showcase some of that today, and hopefully you can take advantage of it because you can actually accelerate your work tremendously. And then thirdly, we provide what we call people-centric collaboration. So you've used project management software. I'm sure you've looked at hundreds, and there are thousands out there. A lot of them focus on projects and on the task. But what many fail to do is identifying what are the things you need to work on for somebody, such as your manager, your direct reports, or your colleague, regardless of the project it belongs in. And then finally, Party Matrix is available as a SaaS software, but also as a HIPAA compliance and Azure GovCloud, as well as managed private Azure deployments. So if you're interested in sort of our more enterprise deployment, be sure to reach out to us. So going back to the fundamental concept behind Party Matrix, there's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: what is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important. So what this really gets at is that every single day, we're being pinged, right, by emails and so forth. Just think about this morning when you woke up and you look at your, what do you do first? You're probably looking at your emails, and you're seeing all these emails that are coming in, and it's requiring your attention. It's pulling you away from whatever it is that you need to work on. And that's the things that are urgent. What happens is it's just there, it's pinging us, it's pulling us into this mode where we just want to respond to those emails. And whether or not they're actually fundamentally driving your performance or fundamentally driving your goals for you to achieve those critical projects, the answer is typically no. And that is the sort of dichotomy between urgency and importance, which is you were never actually ever able to find time to focus on what truly matters. So one thing I'd like to do is I like to ask the audience and you as you're thinking about this, which is imagine take out a piece of paper and write down all the things you have to do. So what are the things that you have to work on today? What are the things that you work on this week, this month? And then the second thing I want you to consider is as that list is growing, where are you adding your new task? Do you add at the bottom or do you add at the top? Or do you add at the middle? And then when you work on it, what do you work on? Do you work on the things at the top or at the bottom or somewhere random in the middle? And so instead of looking at it as a list, I'd like you to take that and then split it into these 4 buckets. You can think of the things that are important and urgent, going back to Eisenhower philosophy, the things that are important, but then also urgent, and put that in quadrant 1, right? These are the things that you got to do now. That's where you should really be focusing your time. The things that are important and not urgent, those are the things in quadrant 2, where you should be planning for. And then what are the things you can delegate to somebody else? That could be your colleagues, that could be an external party where perhaps someone else can do a better job. And then the rest of it belongs on inbox. And so try your best to actually take this entire list, and then put it into the spectrum, into these 4 buckets. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be very, very hard to decide what are the things in quadrant 1 and what are the things in quadrant 2. And one thing that's not so obvious is that actually in the beginning, when you first use Matrix, and if you're actually using our software the way it's meant to be, your quadrant 1 will be pretty full because you have all these things that are important and urgent. But if you're doing a great job, one thing you'll notice is actually the quadrant 1 start going away, and quadrant 2 is where you're really spending your time, because that means you're actually planning for the work that are important and you're not fighting fires. So keep that in mind. So what Party Matrix is a software that takes all these tasks and all these action items that you have to do, and we're creating a structure around it for you. And so it's a communication tool. So what that means is now that you've done this list of yours, walk around the office and start comparing notes. Do you agree with your manager? Do you agree with your colleagues? Do you agree with your direct reports on all these priorities that you've listed? And if the answer is yes, and it's always aligned, then it's great. You don't really need a software like Party Matrix. It means you know exactly what you're working on. But where we add value is the disrepancy. And that's where it gets really interesting. So this 4-quadrant Eisenhower matrix, because it forces you into the structure, it actually creates alignment from the very beginning. And then if you ever find disagreement, that's where you should be focusing your time and effort. So if we can go and help you identify one thing that you shouldn't be doing, right? Or that you were going to work on, but now you shouldn't be doing because we identified that that's not really priority, then we've saved you a ton of time and effort. And you can imagine, you might be working on a project that's just a few thousand worth value, a few $1,000s, or about millions of dollars. And you're committing to all these resources and so forth down the road with all these meetings and so forth. And if you're able to eliminate that, then you can actually spend that effort elsewhere. And that's what success with Party Matrix really is from. So with that, what I'd like to do is I'm going to go into the demo itself, but I do want to bring to your attention that the webinars, because they're recorded, we post them on affluence.com/webinars if you want to go and review some of the other things that we've done. And of course, support at Affluence as a key contact. So always reach out to us if you have any questions, concerns, etc. So let's jump to the demo. As I mentioned in the chat section, you can submit questions, and then if I see questions that are relevant and I can jump in at the appropriate time, I'll try my best to address them. Okay, and now what I've done is I've opened up Party Matrix. And as you can see, this is the web app version of Party Matrix. And the one thing I want to bring your attention to is the 4 quadrants. And so you see how I actually have very, very similar quadrant names to what I showed you in that 4-quadrant picture. So I have the things in quadrant 1 as do now, do later, And then I did customize this a little bit, but this is the delegate, and then this is that inbox. And so this is a standard matrix. Every single project in Matrix has this view. So use that as a way for you to sort of categorize all your information. And creating a task is actually very simple. So this is a task, right? And then the way it works with Matrix is we actually use natural language to help interpret the task, etc., as you're using it. Actually, so book travel for August, okay? But I'm going to say do this, but then do in 2 days. So when I create a task in Matrix, what happens is Matrix goes and actually interprets the text as I type it. So then book travel for August due in 2 days. Now you can see that a due date is set for me. So now I'm reminded to actually get this done. And so it belongs in a certain quadrant. And then because we realize that it's about travel, we use an icon here and you can change this as needed. And so you can see that I can add it to any single matrix. And then if I want to go and reprioritize this because I want to say that this is something that's important and urgent, everything is just drag and drop. And so that's the basic way to use Matrix in terms of adding a task. When you have a task on the right-hand side, this is what's called the item details. And the item details you can think of as a way to add additional information related to the task. So for example, I might want to star a task, which means this is very important and I want to raise awareness. And then second, I can decide who the owner is. Let's say I want to delegate to somebody else. I just click on that and now you see how this person is a new owner. And there can only be one owner. And that's sort of the point, which is it's hard to have priorities if you have multiple owners, because then someone will say, I thought you were responsible, right? You don't want that. So Party Matrix has one owner, and then other people can be involved, but they're called followers. And then you have progress, effort, reminders, and due dates. You saw how I set the due date, but there's a difference between due date and reminders that I want to highlight. Imagine if you have a critical project that's due in 3 months. Okay, you set the due date due in 3 months. If you wait until that day to get that to work on that, it's going to be far too late. So you want reminders ahead of time. So the way that I like to set reminders, of course, you can click on this UI, but I can also say, remind me daily. And so now what's happening is that Party Matrix not only helps you set the date for a certain task, it also will send you reminders. And the nice thing about this is because I assigned to somebody else, it'll remind that person as well. So now they know that they need to work on it. So you can pause for a moment and realize that, wait a minute, I've just created a task that's very important. And now not only have I set a date, I'm reminding the appropriate stakeholders that they need to work on it. And so that's how we ensure that these critical tasks are not slipping and falling through the cracks. As you look down more, we have what's called the chat section. And you can think of the chat section as a contextual way for you to communicate about a task, but only related to that task, right? So here's an example of why you need to use this. How often is it that maybe you're inside Microsoft Teams and you're chatting with your manager about all these different things that you were going to work on, and you're talking about, project A, project B, etc. So then 6 months later, when you're reviewing, you're going to realize, wait a minute, what did we talk about? And it's hard to go back to a Teams conversation, or hard to go back to an email thread or a meeting, refer to a meeting, and then refer to the decisions that were made. So with Party Matrix, you can have this chat section as a way to have all that conversation, but only related to this task. And then anyone who actually looks at this particular action item can see exactly everything that's been talked about. And Party Matrix provides you a full history of all the changes that's happening related to that task. If you think about the things, for example, this thing right here is due today, right? That's pretty trivial. You can think of how this is a very real-time conversation. But where truly valuable is that in 6 months, and you're going back to this task, we have that full context available. And not only that, you can export this, you can print this out. And then if someone leaves the organization and someone else has to take over, they can actually look at the task and the priorities and be able to understand why decisions were made in what way. And so if you think about priorities, it's not just about at this moment in time, it's about the past, it's about the present, and it's about the future, right? So then you're really using Party Matrix as a way to ensure that the organization, the team, actually has all the knowledge needed to ensure that they're working on the right thing. And so keep that in mind. And the notes section is actually pretty trivial, pretty easy to understand. The notes section is where you add the subtask. You can also, for example, I can do subtask 1, subtask 2, subtask 3. And so with Party Matrix, what happens is when you create these subtasks, as you mark them as done, it updates the progress. And then we have the resources section. And so the resource section is where you can add additional metadata, such as documents, files, emails, etc., that's relevant to the task at hand. The whole idea, again, is to have one central place to organize everything that you need for that particular action item. So that's how a quadrant, that's how a task works. Now, let me show you how to actually create a project. So for example, the way to create a project is you go to here and then you click on show all your projects and add a project. When I go to add a project, when you do this now, if you're first using Party Matrix for the first time, you have this option to create a blank project. But you also have the option to go to the public templates. So the idea around the public templates is actually where we've gone and we've created some templates that you can use in terms of the Eisenhower Matrix as being one template, but also maybe there's other terminologies such as in the quadrants or SWOT analysis or all the other things that you may have been exposed to in business school, et cetera. So those templates are all available for you for free right here. You can just launch a project from that. But I'm going to go ahead and create a blank project here. I'm going to call this, I'll call this project Increase Sales by 20%. Okay, so imagine this is an initiative I have, and then I can go ahead and choose sort of the a color and the group. A group you can think of as like a department or something like that, that all the people relevant to this particular project. But I'm going to go ahead and add a project, and that's how easy it is to add a project. And when you add a project, right on the right-hand side here, this is called the project details. That's supposed to item details that we saw earlier. You can also access that by clicking on this icon right here. On this right-hand side, you're able to, again, star project, which you see how it actually brings it up to the very top here. So I can always see that, have visibility there. And I can see what team members that I want in here. So let's say if I want to invite a team member, I can do that. And then the other cool thing is I can actually change the quadrant names. And the reason why we let you change the quadrant names is because this is where you can build your own version of the Party Matrix in using terminology that makes sense to you. We have customers that actually build out best practices within their own organization because they don't want to use the do now, do later, delegate, and postpone, right? Maybe postpone should be named something else. Sometimes engineering organizations prefer P1 for high priority, P2, P3, right? And so with Party Matrix, you're able to do all of those. The best thing about all of this is once you've sort of created those terminologies and the color coding that you like, because you can click on this to change the color, you can actually go ahead and save it as a template. Now that you've saved it as a template, when you go back to launching Party Matrix, a new project, you can actually choose from the template, and that allows you to actually use that over and over again without having to customize that. So that is how a project works, and that is how items work. But let me pause for a second because you see how here I created a project, increase sales by 20%. But one thing that we're doing with Party Matrix is we're adding a whole new intelligence layer, because if I were to create a project here called increase sales by 20%, now I have to brainstorm what are all the things I can do. Well, why not let our artificial intelligence help you with that? So if you were to go to our onboarding page here and just ask you a simple question, what's my goal? Okay, and so I can actually literally type in increase sales by 20% here and click on build my action plan. I've done that already for the demo, and so I can go ahead and jump to that right here. And now this was actually generated in real time by Party Matrix. And we actually went and created all these different action items for you with the different quadrants on it, with all the ideas already in play. So instead of just typing one simple project and just have your goal, Party Matrix will go and generate, using our generative AI, all these different ideas for you as a starting point. And so we've just saved you hours, if not days, of brainstorming. And now all you have to do is take this, modify it, update it to your likings, and then ensuring that it actually works for your organization. It's not going to be perfect. It's not intended to, but what it does is it saves you time and create a starting point. So you can imagine that if you were using Party Matrix and you went in and actually created 5, 10 different goals, right? Your weekly goals, your quarterly goals, or if you were new to your role, you can literally type into Party Matrix, what should I work on my first 30 days as a senior project manager? And our system will go and help you with that and generate all these different action items for you in each of the quadrants. And so use that, leverage that. It's extremely powerful and it could save you a lot of time. But you can see that each of these things is actually at a high level. Now, what if we want to dig deeper? So for example, I want to go and define target audience. Well, you can see that in here, I actually have some notes here. That was, again, generated by our system. But now what if I want to break it further, like into more details? What should I do in terms of defining target audience? I can click on what's called Fill with AI. So what Fill with AI does, actually, it's ironically, it gives me the same answer here. But what Fill with AI does is it takes the information that you have in this task and it actually generates additional information around the notes itself. And so when you're creating a task in Matrix, imagine if you're creating a task and which is generate new proposal or something like that, and you don't know what to put in the notes, but you want to assign it to somebody else and you want them to get some ideas on how to get started. Leverage our Fill with AI to actually generate that information for you. So that's a second layer on the AI side that you can use to boost your productivity today. So what you've just seen is you've seen our project, you've seen our goal generating system, and you've seen our task. One thing I want to show you now is actually how we tie together into the Microsoft Teams and Outlook ecosystem. So here's how it works. The way, if you have Outlook, you can go and install Matrix. You go to Add and Store and install Matrix. When you install Matrix, you can get access to this additional add-in. So let's say I have an email open, and here's what happens. You get an email that's very important, right? From a client, from a customer, from your executive, and then you need to respond to it. Well, if it's something you can respond to today, that's pretty easy. You can just go and respond, or you start or something like that, or flag it. But what happens if you have to go and answer it in like 3 months or in 2 weeks, when you have to go and do additional data collection? And then how do you ensure that you don't forget it? So if you flag it, that's great. But if you have 50 flagged emails, in fact, I feel like 150 flag emails, you're going to start losing track of things really quickly. You can even set reminders sort of on emails, but the challenge there is, how do you know actually when to work on it? What if you need to pull in new people and assign to somebody? So Matrix for Outlook provides a really powerful way to take any emails that comes in and go to prioritize that email. So once you install Matrix, you see here, I actually have this option on the panel here. I click on the ellipsis, this opens here, and then you see that I have the option to prioritize email. So this is how it looks. When I take a task and I prioritize it, Matrix opens this panel on the right-hand side. It takes the subject, create a task name out of it. I can choose what project it belongs in. Okay, so you see how, so I see my team priorities here, and I can choose what quadrant it belongs in. So now I can suddenly go and take an email and say, this is an important and urgent email, right? I'm putting in quadrant 1, and then I can assign it to somebody else too. And then I can make a due date. So this is something that you can't do with Outlook as it is. Yet at the same time, emails is where our main source of communication comes in. And so Matrix is probably one of the best solutions out there to ensure that your emails are not dropped and that the most important emails are always tackled. And so whenever you receive an important email, use Matrix, prioritize it, capture it, set due dates, and suddenly you realize that you'll get all these reminders and so forth to ensure that you go back to that email and answer it. And so I click capture email. You see how right after I click capture email, it opens this item detail view almost exactly like what you saw inside the web application, right? The project it belongs in, I can move project if needed. I have the name here I can customize. It says who's it's assigned to. And not only that, actually the email itself has been uploaded as an EML file, as a resource. The reason that's actually really helpful is because Eugenia here, for example, doesn't have access to my email, but now she can actually open that email and be able to respond to it. And that's what makes Matrix really powerful, because as you're having a conversation around this email that you're doing for a client, you can pull in other folks, right? So I can say invite Remy, for example. Well, I can do something like this, and I actually can pull in engineering, pull in marketing, pull in your executive, etc. And so actually Remy isn't part of this project, so now I got to go and invite Remy here. Okay, so you see how I go back to this item here, I can actually open it. And so you see how I can go to Party Matrix here, open Party Matrix. And because I prioritize this task already, you see how Party Matrix logo show up right here, I can actually click open item. And so you see how I've added Remy to this item as well. Now, the nice thing is Remy can go and take a look at this and be able to get a sense of what are we talking about, et cetera. And you're doing all of this without creating another email thread. And that's what's really helpful, because you don't want more emails. You're going to lose track of more things. And if you're working on documents or links, etc., in order to respond to this, right? Imagine if this was your executive asking for the quarterly summary. Well, you've taken that email, prioritize it, and then you can now attach documents that's relevant here. And then when you're actually ready to respond, all that information is available in one central place. The other powerful thing about Party Matrix is actually the ability for you to attach an email to an existing task. So instead of actually just going and create new tasks all the time, we actually let you hover over an existing task and actually just attach it. And so you literally just search for the Party Matrix action item. And so here we actually show you some task already, but you can search and then attach it directly here. And this is really helpful, again, if you're working, let's say with a client, you have a task inside Party Matrix that's already open for them, and you get a new email from them, but you want to make sure everyone else who's relevant are aware of that, right? And you don't want to forward that email. If you forward that email, it's just going to go into someone else's inbox, and they may or may not know or read it or realize that it's all relevant. So instead, what you do is you attach the email to the task that's already in place. And now when you go back to that task and you're working on it over the course of 3 months or 6 months or whatever, all that information is available as a resource. Really powerful way to manage your emails. This is actually one of the core reasons why people love Party Matrix and why we invested so much in the Microsoft ecosystem, is because the email management side is actually so important. The other thing I want to mention is actually the Microsoft Teams integrations itself. So if you have Microsoft Teams, you can go to the App Store here, install Party Matrix, and then what happens is you get Party Matrix shows up here, right click, you pin it, and when you pin it, it actually just stays here for you to see. And you see how I opened up Party Matrix and I see that same view as the web app. Everything that you saw in the web app is actually available here for you. The list of projects, the tasks, etc. But there's several things that we do inside Teams that's really, really unique. I mentioned earlier how Party Matrix is a people-centric tool, and everything I've shown you so far is based on projects. But check this out. If I go to a chat, imagine if this is a chat with a teammate. You can click on this plus icon and you open Party Matrix. And when you do, you have two options. You have a full project view, which allows you to attach a Party Matrix project to a tab inside Teams, but you can also attach a one-on-one view. The one-on-one view is a way for you to see everything you have to do for somebody or with somebody. So I already have it installed here, the PM one-on-one. And when I open this, you can see that it actually, I can pre-populate this with Eugenia right here. And so I'm going to chat with her, and actually I can open this up and see all the tasks I have in common with her, regardless of projects. So what we've done is we've flipped the whole thing around, and instead of you having to click through each project in Party Matrix, instead of you having to go to Party Matrix in the first place, and then searching for all the things you have to do for her, you can actually see it all in one central place. If you're having a conversation with your manager, it is so easy because you literally just open this up, you just talk through it. And instead of talking about status updates and so forth, what you're really focusing on is priorities. Are these the right thing I'm working on? Yes, no, right? Hey, is this due date correct? Let's change it. You see how all the things that are overdue are red, very, very visual for me to see. And then that email that I created as a task earlier showed up right here too, right? Because the reason is Eugenia is on here and I'm on here. And so that's how Party Matrix facilitates all of this and makes your meetings a lot more effective. And in fact, what's really interesting is you can actually add share tasks directly here. So when you have a meeting with your manager or your direct report and you're brainstorming, you're talking about all these different things you're going to do, you don't have to go to Party Matrix. You don't even have to leave this view. You just click on Add Share Task, and then you can type in the task name, and then you type it, make sure that you say due in 1 week, due in 2 months, due next Tuesday, 2 p.m. or something like that, and then choose the appropriate project as you create the task. And so your whole meeting becomes much more seamless. And then that excuse that says, oh yeah, I forgot to write that down, has just completely vanished because you're doing this live as you're having the meeting. So really take advantage of this. This is one of my favorite capabilities inside Protometrics just because it's so powerful and so unique in all of that. The other thing that happens inside Microsoft Teams too is we go and we can take any conversation that you have with your teammate and convert into tasks for you. So for example, let's say your manager sends you an email or sends you a message in Teams and say, could you send me a report? You can just click on this ... and create Protometrics item. I don't even have to go to Protometrics. And in fact, I can create this task, choose the project, choose the quadrant directly here and create it. So that saves me a ton of time. And not only that, I can actually send tasks inside Teams as well, like what you have here. So that's one of the things that actually makes our integration with Teams really, really powerful. But we also try to provide a place for you to get additional context, right? So for example, let's say you have a meeting. Okay, so I'm going to create a new meeting here, and I'm going to meet with manager. Okay, so imagine this is a meeting that you have with your manager, and you can go ahead and save it. Okay, so now you have a meeting with your manager. If you click on this and you open up the Microsoft Teams meeting, you also have a tab. And in this tab, again, you can choose Protometrics. What's really powerful about this view is what this is called the agenda view. So the way the agenda view works is it actually allows you to create a tab here inside the meeting. And so as you have a meeting, you can actually take notes. And from the notes, you can actually create tasks directly here. Additionally, what we do is we provide you some list of Protometrics action items that might be relevant to the meeting. So if you have a meeting with your manager, we can go and find out all the tasks you have in common with your manager, and maybe you can add it into the meeting, and so you can talk about it during your agenda itself. So that's another new capability that we have inside the Teams ecosystem that is very unique and pretty much non-existent anywhere else. And so Protometrics provide a single package for all of that together. So with that, I'm actually going to go back to Protometrics here, and I want to go and re-emphasize on the things that you should do. While there's a lot more capabilities, the stuff that I've shown you, if you take advantage of it, you would have captured 80% of the value in Protometrics with 20% of the work. One, make sure that you create a project for your personal priorities, a team priorities, and then also a project for key initiatives that you're working on, right? Leverage our goal system if you have specific goals, such as quarterly goals or annual goals or something like that. You see how here, we suggest, how do I get a promotion, right? Or, how do I increase my team effectiveness? Or how do I improve the supply chain in my manufacturing process? Things like that. And so leverage Protometrics to create those different projects. So that's the first thing you got to do. The second is in each of these projects, make sure you create tasks and make sure that they have due dates. It is so crucial that they have due dates, because when something is due, there's a date attached to it, then you can better understand when you should work on them. You can always change the due dates, and Protometrics provides a full record of that. But if you do that, and then you're putting the quadrants, you're using the quadrants as a way to prioritize a different task and so forth, and then you're sharing it with the team members, you've captured a lot of value, because I can't emphasize this enough. Protometrics is a communication tool, right? It's not just a way to track all the stuff that you have. It's a way to communicate to everyone what the priorities should be. And you should always be looking for disrepancy. Always be looking for disrepancy. Try to find that. The moment you find one, it means that we've done our job. We've added value to you. We help you identify what you should work on, should not work on. And now I'm going to go real quick through a couple of other things that I think might be relevant, but now maybe more specific to your own use case. So for example, if you go to our connectors page, you're able to pull in your Outlook calendar, your to-do planner, Azure DevOps, and so forth. The other thing you can do is you can install our Chrome and Edge extension. If you use a lot of links and you want to attach them to Protometrics, just install our extensions. That allows you to convert any web page or SharePoint page or Google Docs into a task inside Party Matrix. And so make sure that you install our Outlook integration, and that's separate from the Teams integration. And so that's something that, sometimes some organizations require requires IT to be involved. So that's how you can get IT to help you install that across your organization. And with that, I'm going to pause. I'm going to check the chat here to see if there's any questions. And so if you have additional questions, please feel free to send me a message there. And so I'll take a look at that. And in the meantime, I'm actually going to switch back to the PowerPoint here. And I want to highlight a couple things again, just to emphasize my point, which is, if you haven't already, sign up for Party Matrix and use our apps and Teams and Outlook if applicable. You do not need Teams and Outlook to use Party Matrix. Our application works on web app, mobile app, etc. And again, create at least 3 projects: the personal priorities, share team priorities, and key initiative. Invite the appropriate team members and pitch to them on why it's important to focus on high impact tasks. That's really important, because you want to make sure that people are aligned on what's important and also what's not important, and then create action items in Party Matrix with due dates. So what success with Party Matrix looks like is the following. 1, you're using Party Matrix as the central place to track all priorities, right? So then remember, priorities does not mean tasks. You don't want to track, very, very trivial things and then get overwhelmed with it. Instead, use Party Matrix to track things that actually matters. And so that's what you want to make sure you do. And then make sure everyone's aligned, and success means that everyone truly goes into Party Matrix and say, okay, we're all working on the right thing, right? And then whenever you find disagreements, start tackling them right away. You saw how I created templates earlier. With Party Matrix, you can actually go and actually even build out the whole matrix too. So it's not just the matrix and the quadrant names, but if you create tasks inside Party Matrix, you can templatize the whole thing. You can think of it as employee onboarding processes or standard operating procedures. And now when you create those templates, you can launch them and you save yourself a ton of time. And then make sure that you prioritize your emails so that they're never forgotten. So with that, that's the end of my portion of it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the questions that people have here and try to address them wherever relevant. Would you use an Eisenhower matrix to figure out tasks that need brain power, time, or both? And would you use tags for that? That's a great question, Helen. So essentially what happens is you can use the importance and urgency as always the core, but you can actually change. Let me go back to here. So imagine if you want to think about time versus effort, right? You see how I can actually, let me see if I can open up a different matrix here. So I also have that increased sales by 20% here, but this is effort and impact. And so I love it whenever you have sort of multiple dimensions that you're thinking about, because it's always the low of something, the high of something, and then versus another dimension, right? Important, not important, urgent, not urgent, low effort, high effort, low impact, high impact. And so anything that's sort of like a 2x2 matrix fits really well within the Party Matrix ecosystem. So my recommendation, if you want to think about brain power and time, brain power, I would almost consider as effort. And so here, then you can go and change low brain power, high impact or something like that, as long as you use a terminology that your teammates, when they look at it, they also understand. And then as you add all this information, you realize, hey, this is where I should be really focusing my time on. And I think that would be a really good way to communicate. Do tasks also update from Microsoft 365? So with the connectors, we create what's called a one-way integration. So what that means is that if you use Microsoft Planner or Azure DevOps, et cetera, you can pull them into Party Matrix and they exist as independent projects. And then when you update those Azure DevOps projects or your Planner project, it actually updates inside Party Matrix. It's read-only on the Party Matrix side. When you update it inside Party Matrix, it does not update the Microsoft side. But over time, what you'll find is that actually all of these other software solutions that you use that you can connect to actually can fit within the Party Matrix ecosystem. So hopefully what it does is it provides you a starting points for you to get started, but then Party Matrix will actually be the core solution for you moving forward. So do you need them to be an actual team member, or can Party Matrix be shared with external party? Party Matrix can be shared with external parties. So you see here, when I add a team member, I can actually choose from my team, right? So my team are people that's on my license, but I actually can also choose others within my organization, or I can actually type in an email from a totally external party. So what happens is when you do invite someone from an external party, just remember that if someone's in a project, they can see all the tasks in that project. So you got to make sure you keep that in mind. The second thing is, if you want, you can also share a project as read-only mode. So for example, here, I can take a project and share read-only mode, and then you get a link that you can send to a third party. Imagine if it's a client, right? Where you want them to see the Party Matrix, but you don't want them to edit it, so they can see the status of what things are. So Party Matrix allows you to actually cross collaborate, and then other organizations can have their own licenses of Party Matrix, however appropriate, and actually you can use it one central place to work together. So unlike Planner and so forth, which actually creates a lot of restriction in terms of collaboration, Party Matrix provides a way for you to actually work with external parties. We also have what's called a consultant license, where you're able to have team members who are actually not part of your organization, but they don't actually see each other, because you obviously don't want your clients to see each other. So you might have a project with multiple clients. I'm sorry, you might have multiple projects, each with different clients, and they are able to work in sort of independently with you being the center. So if you have questions around that, reach out to us, support@affluence.com, because that's actually a special tier of license for collaborating with external parties in Pretty Matrix. Um, can you add optional attendees to tasks? That's a really interesting question in terms of optional attendees. I think if someone should be following the task, I think you should always add them, because they can always unfollow. But what happens is when you add someone as a follower to a task, then they get updates. It's just like, someone is CC'd, et cetera. But the idea again is you have one owner, but you might have multiple followers. And so if you're an executive, you want to follow a certain task, but you're not necessarily chiming on it, but you want to know that whenever it's updated, you can always add yourself to the task as a follower. The other component of it is that even if you're not following a task, you can still see the status of each of those tasks if you're in the project. So the way the permission control works at a per project level is that anyone who's in a project can see all the tasks in that project. Now, so what that means is, even if you're not a follower, you can go through and click on it, right? But if you're a follower, then when there's changes, you actually get alerted of the changes, and that's really helpful. The third is you can actually assign a task to someone who's not in a project. And what happens then is they don't get to see the rest of the project. They see it in their inbox. And so Matrix has a concept called inbox. And so you can think of inbox as tasks that do not belong in a certain project. So for example, let's say you and I work together, and then you have a project and you only want me to access one task inside that project. You add me, but you decline to invite me to the project itself. So then what happens is I don't see the rest of the task in the project, but I can see the task that you assign to me, and it will show up my inbox here because it does not belong in a project for me, right? It's a project I don't have access to. Now, if I go and actually move that task out of that inbox into my own project, then that link is disconnected. And so then the task gets duplicated and now it's no longer linked together. But if I don't move that task out of the inbox, then I can update that task in my inbox, and it actually updates in your project. So a task can only be associated with one project at most. It can be associated with 0 project, in which case it belongs in the inbox. Hopefully that clarifies. Can box link be added? Absolutely. So you can see how, in the resource section, you can go to resource and you can add any links. Actually, Party Matrix is it's a whole linking system. And what that means is that every task in Party Matrix has a link. So for example, product positioning, targeted advertising, right? I'm going to just go and say due in 2 months. And then actually, I probably should do here. Due in 2 months. Oh, it changed the due date for me there. I'm going to say this due in 1 month. And so what I can do is actually I can copy the link here. You can see here, click on share, copy the link. And then when I go back to the resource section, I can actually link to the item itself, and actually targeted advertising. Let's see here. Okay, I can link to this targeted advertising, and then I can say that this is blocked by. And so now what I've just done is actually I've created these tasks that are linking together. And then what's neat about that is that if I were to go to a different view of Party Matrix, I can go to the list view, I can go to the calendar view. So here, for example, I go to calendar view, that task is here. I can also go to the Gantt chart view, and it actually links these tasks together. So it's a pretty useful way to actually link all those things together. But what I'm trying to say is that in Party Matrix, in the resource section, you can link to anything that has URL. In fact, every message in Teams has a URL too. So when I show you how you can create a task from a Teams message, what happens? We're actually linking back to that moment in time when you had that conversation. It's so helpful because you're going to talk about so many different things inside Teams conversation. When you create a task from Party Matrix, it'll link back to that moment in time, and so you can actually click a button, jump back into history, and see what you actually talked about inside Teams. So going back to the Box link or Dropbox link or SharePoint or Google Drive, you can add all of those resources into Party Matrix, and it actually just continues to add here, and then you can jump to any of those as needed. Can you automatically pull one quadrant into another matrix? So there's actually a couple of things that we're doing there. And so Party Matrix has what's called an API, and for our enterprise customers, you can program that. But then the second thing that we have is actually we have something called workflows. So if you went to the Party Matrix Teams App Store, you can actually install these things called workflow. And we actually have a couple of workflow out there. But for example, when a task is overdue, move it to quadrant 1. And so you can actually create all these different rules, if this, then that. And so Party Matrix integrates with Power Apps Automate. And so that allows you to create rules that says if this happens and something else happens. And so for enterprise customers, we can actually do some of these pre-programmed stuff for you. And so, for example, you see here I have, Microsoft Teams form. Microsoft form submission can create a Party Matrix task that link to that form automatically. So you don't have to go and the use case is simple, right? You get a customer, you use Microsoft Forms to get customer feedback or whatever feedback. And so whenever someone submit a form, create a task in Party Matrix. So Party Matrix is able to do all of those things, automations for you. So in terms of automatically pulling one quadrant to another matrix, essentially you can create those different rules. In terms of the AI side, what the cool thing about this AI thing is actually none of your data is fed into any AI system. The second is that only it's generative AI. So what that means is only your prompt here, take that prompt and then convert it. All the other tasks are generated for you. So it's more, you can think of it as more of like a one-way leverage of AI, where we're taking the general domain knowledge from the world and feeding into you as opposed to the other way around. We also have enterprise solutions that you have absolute control over all of that. So you don't have to leverage any of our AI capabilities. And if you don't leverage AI capabilities, then nothing is fed into other systems. And so in terms of accessing Party Matrix, so we have if you're able to install our Teams app and you're going to install our Outlook app and our access our web app, then you can access Party Matrix. So we do have installed desktop versions of Party Matrix for Windows and Mac and so forth. And some customers experience more, quote, firewall issues in terms of connections. But if typically with the web app and inside the Teams app and Outlook app, those issues aren't there. In terms of product capabilities, if you need certain capabilities turned off for our enterprise customers, again, that's something that we can do. We also have what's called private deployments. So what that means is all your data is actually siloed and installed only for that particular tenant. So you can see how we actually have the HIPAA compliance, a government cloud solution. And so we actually have, for example, government customers that's actually on their own cloud. The other question is around whether or not the external customers have access to Party Matrix. When you do that read-only version that I showed you here, they don't need Party Matrix because when you share this read-only, they can just open that URL and see the matrix itself. But if you invite them to the actual task, then they'd be signed up for a Party Matrix. These are fantastic questions. I really appreciate it. I hope I'm addressing all of these questions and answer that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. And if there's additional questions, please feel free to message me, hi@affluence.com, and I'd be happy to answer them. And then if you want to go into any more specific details, we'd be happy to look into it. And thank you so much for everyone that's here today. I appreciate these questions. These are fantastic. And again, this webinar was recorded, and so we'll be posting this on our website. And then we also will have some specific webinars that drive into more specific details. So if you do have any particular request, I'd love to learn about your use cases and have a conversation around that, and be able to take that and provide you a webinar that'll help you achieve those specific goals. Thank you all. Appreciate it.